Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as I said before, patience, especially with organizations and with artists who are still figuring out digital mediums. And again, to reiterate, there are artists, there are organizations that have been doing this work in terms of figuring out how to present to the public through a digital medium, through a digital interface. And it's important to acknowledge them and to learn from them, and especially pay artists that have been doing this work for a while. So I'm sure we'll actually be doing an event, a Facebook Live event on that later next week. And so again, I'm gonna actually go ahead and start with the news or updates that particularly affect artists and Houstonians in general. So one, exclusive actually, which just happened an hour ago, Amazon has stopped receiving non-essential products from sellers mid-coronavirus outbreak. So if you're an artist and you're maybe ordering stuff, or you were looking to order things from Amazon, that might be why it's not showing up, or maybe it's been delayed, and that is because as of an hour ago or so, Amazon will stop receiving non-essential items. Those essential items, according to Reuters, will be baby products, health and household, beauty and personal care, groceries, industrial and scientific, and pet supplies. So again, if you're an artist and maybe you're looking to order art supplies or anything that fits outside of that scope, then that's the reason why there might be a delay or it's not coming. So just to give you an update on that. Another thing, as of today, as of 8 a.m. today, all Harris County bars and nightclubs have been ordered to shut down by Mayor Turner and Lena Hidalgo, in which now restaurants and bars will not be open to the public. I believe restaurants can still do dine-out options where you can go pick up orders, but you cannot eat in. And so that's something we'll have to stay in tune with. Another issue or another thing that's come up today is that the City Council yesterday extended Houston's emergency health declaration. And so it's going to allow the city to take different actions and precautions regarding public safety. So that's something you want to keep an eye on. The City Council extended that health declaration. So that's something to keep an eye on, especially in regards to art events. If you're an artist, if you're looking to do an event or organize an event, keep that in mind and to stay tuned on how the city is addressing a lot of these issues. And then finally, last night, there was a panel that was featured on HowlRound Theater Commons. It was a panel on artists in a time of global pandemic for US-based freelance artists and cultural workers in all disciplines. That is available to see for free. It is ASL and closed captioned. I tuned in last night to watch that. It was very informative. It gave some different answers for different questions. But it's important to kind of, again, keep in context what's happening here in particular in Houston. But there are some general rules that they had that were really useful. So I check that out when you get a chance. Another news, GlassTire.com has a list of as many of the arts organizations that have been closed down or not having gallery visitors or attendees at their spaces. They have a full list, so that includes Art League Houston, Asia Society, Texas Center, Black for Art Museum, Children's Museum of Houston, Buffalo Soldier National Museum, Contemporary Arts Museum, Diverse Works, Holocaust Museum. So if you were looking to go to those spaces, check this list out to see if it's closed down or it's going to be maybe having a digital interface or not. But I would just keep in tune with those spaces individually. And so kind of moving on to the second part of today's Facebook Live event. So there's been a number of resource lists for artists, for freelancers that have been going around, and that's awesome, that's amazing that our community can come together digitally and to provide resources online. But now it's a matter of what will apply to you? Maybe if you haven't applied to grants before, or maybe you don't have that much experience with that, that's totally cool. But what I'm going to do today is maybe go through some of them, and maybe what I've seen will be particularly useful to artists Particularly, some of them don't apply to all artists, for example. Some of them required more paperwork than others. Some of them have very specific contexts. And so, as a writer, myself, and as an artist, I can't give you a general rule of thumb that applies to all of them. So I'm going to go through some of them and maybe offer some insight or some angles to maybe come at them or to put in your proposal. And so we're going to go through to this great resource that started out pretty early, the COVID-19 and freelance artists. So that's COVID-19 freelancer artist resource.wordpress.com. If you Google COVID-19 freelance artists, I'm sure it'll be one of the first that pops up. So kind of going through this, it's just a long list of resources that's really cool, and they're also really cool to kind of provide city-specific or state-specific designations. And so that's kind of like what we're getting at today, is what will apply to us as Houstonians, maybe as Texans if you're in different parts of Texas. And so we're going to go through the one that I've seen really disseminated a lot is the Foundation for Contemporary Arts Emergency Grants. This one's particularly interesting because I think it's included a lot because it has the term emergency in it. And again, this is a really great resource, but there is kind of an angle or kind of attack that you have to use when you go through this one. So this particular grant is if you have sudden and unanticipated opportunities to present your work to the public when there is insufficient time to seek other sources of funding. So this is one to keep in mind, maybe in general, in terms of like you have an event you have to put on, and let's say the venue changed, and so therefore the venue rental went up in price because you changed, and so this would be a good one to apply. Usually what's happening right now is the opposite, where events are being canceled, and then there is no more event, and so you're losing out money or work as a result of that. Another aspect of this grant is if you incur unexpected or unbudgeted expenses for projects close to completion with committed exhibition or performance dates. Again, great resource, but in general is probably not going to apply to a lot in this current context of COVID-19. An angle that perhaps I would take with this particular grant is maybe you're putting together a benefit, perhaps for artists, and it does not designate that it must be in person, if I understand this correctly. The main guidelines are that, again, it's sudden and unanticipated opportunity to present work, and it is a multidisciplinary program. And so with this one, they even have an eligibility questionnaire. The applicants must be living in the United States. Applicants must have committed performance or exhibition opportunities and be able to provide specific dates at the time of application. Applicants must be individual artists or an individual representing an artist collective, etc. And that's, in terms of like a digital presence, it doesn't say. Yeah, it does not limit it to only physical events. So I think this would be a really interesting grant to apply for in terms of maybe you're putting together an online digital benefit for artists. If maybe you had an event that was happening in a physical space and it got canceled, or venue had to cancel it because of coronavirus related issues, I would maybe apply to this in that context. If you have an event that's been maybe canceled and therefore you have to move it digitally, and maybe you need a different technology or tools to put on that event still, or you want to put on a benefit for artists, or however, I would maybe look at this one. And so I just want to reiterate that a lot of these can be found, again, on COVID-19 freelance artist resources, .wordpress.com. Again, if you Google COVID-19 freelance artist resources, you'll more than likely, this will probably be one of the first ones you'll find. In fact, let me see, if you Google that, I'm sure it'll be one of the first that pops up. If not, again, on Thursday, I'll be publishing a list of resources that I've found and with some of this context applied as well. And then looking up other emergency grants and maybe a different angle that you might want to take on some. All right. The next one I will be looking at NYFA, New York Foundation for the Arts. So for them, they're another list of resources as far as like their own grants. Again, this is just for the most part another list, and so maybe look at that, maybe check on that, see if it's updated. One that's been heavily kind of disseminated is the Rashenberg Emergency Grant, and then let me kind of provide that context. That is administered through NYFA. Yes, it's partnering with the Robert Rashenberg Foundation. So for this one, it's pretty quick from what it says in the grant application, that it's a very quick turnaround. And it's one-time grants of $5,000 for unexpected medical emergencies. And that's really the key words to take from this, is that it has to be an unexpected medical emergency. So it provides a one-time cash grant of up to $5,000 to cover expenses by one-time unexpected medical emergencies. Eligible expenses include, but are not limited to, hospital and doctor bills, tests, physical, occupational therapy, prescription drugs specifically for the emergency medical condition, and emergency dental work. So the issue with that is that you can't really apply for it in continuing medical issues. So like if you have a reoccurring or you have a continuous condition or an illness, then this will not be able to kind of apply to you in terms of like continuing medical care. This is for medical emergencies, one-time emergencies. So if you encounter that during this context of this time, this is really great, but unfortunately that's kind of the limitation of that in terms of like what you may need. And so if you have a recurring or continuous medical condition, what you need medical care for, this will not particularly apply. This is only for one-time new medical emergencies. And so the grants cannot be used to cover expenses for non-emergency medical conditions, ongoing psychiatric treatment, regular dental checkups or procedures, eyeglasses, elective surgery, non-medical expenses resulting from financial hardship, purchase of materials, loan repayment, purchase of insurance, and loss of property, even if the result of an emergency. So again, keep this in mind, maybe file it for future use in terms if you come up with a new medical condition. I know particularly with artists losing income because of canceled dates or canceled events, this one would be if you were to get sick during this context of time and you maybe don't have the expenses to cover that, your medical emergency. Again, keep this in mind, but unfortunately it's not for continuing medical conditions. The next one I kind of want to look at is the Haven Foundation. This is particularly for freelance professionals in the arts. And so one common theme that I am seeing, in particular to a lot of these grants, a lot of these emergency grants, is that you kind of have to prove that you're an artist, a creative, or like a freelance qualified person. And so there are a few ways to do that I recommend maybe keeping up with. One is having an artist CV. If you don't have one of those, later today we will be in our resource library posting a template for CVs that you can use in case if you don't have one. If you do have one, great. Keep that ready. A lot of grants, emergency grants, and later as we'll cover unemployment, a lot of organizations, what they'll require is kind of like a record or proof that you are a regular professional practicing artist. And so the ways to prove that are more than one. One of them is having a regular CV, an artist CV, and again, later today we'll be publishing on our artist resource library a template for that. Two, another way is to have a website, a regular website or online presence of your work. That again keeps record of that you're a practicing professional artist. if you don't have your own website, or maybe you've had to cancel your website just because they can be pretty expensive, then what we recommend, or what we have available to artists, is our Fresh Arts Registry. And I can pull that up real quick. It's just freshartsregistry.org, where you can set up an online profile. And here you can have an art gallery, you can have your artist statement, your bio. There's a video, you can have video list, you can have more images, you can have your contact. But again, like if you, let's say, need proof that you're an artist, or you're a professional artist, and maybe they ask you, or a grant asks you for a website and you can't afford one, or you don't have one, then please, you're more than welcome to create this as a free resource, and can fulfill some of those requirements. But to kind of go back to to this particular grant, emergency grant, this one applies to, again, freelance qualified people, a professional experiencing a specific career-threatening emergency. So the qualified person must have experienced a recent unforeseen emergency or triggering event that significantly and adversely affected the qualified person's ability to produce, perform, and/or market his or her work, and thus creates the need for immediate relief funds and assistance. The foundation is not able to assist in situations of financial need that result solely from lack of employment, poor sales, and poor business practices. So again, it's key to kind of read in on that language, which is recent unforeseen emergency or triggering event. And so for that, again, you might want to keep in mind and making sure and defining what that means for you. Because again, what it doesn't fund is lack of employment, poor sales, and or poor business practices. So maybe cancellation of events, cancellation of maybe sales, rather than poor sales, cancellation of sales. That's one way to frame it. That's one angle to take at it, to look at this. They have a list of how to apply to this. The main issue is that you have to mail it in. So you physically have to mail it. So keep that in mind. This one will probably take a while for it to come back to you, for you to receive any kind of response. So again, it's maybe more like in terms of like being able to apply for it, maybe it's a bit more lenient, or maybe you can come at it with different angles. But again, the drawback is that you have to mail that in. So keep that in mind when you're looking at some of these applications, is whether or not they're digital or they're mailed in. Again, obviously the turnaround time will be completely different based on that. Another resource is Surf Plus. They have recently launched a new fund for artists, and let me pull up the context for that. The main thing about this one, the main thing about this particular opportunity is that it applies mainly to craft artists. So if you're looking at it as a writer or as a visual artist, maybe who paints or works in media, the main issue with this one is that it only applies to craft artists. So if you're working in sculpture, maybe jewelry, woodworking, metalworking, would definitely look at this one, but unfortunately it does not, as far as I see, apply to any other arts. Yeah. And so they have not formally released this information on their website. That's why I'm looking at my email. They've emailed this information out. So it's key to also sign up for as many newsletters as you can, and maybe keep up to date on that in terms of that, is signing up for these newsletters. And so again, this is primarily for craft artists. And to kind of give you an idea of like what you should have ready when you're applying to these grants, when you're applying for any kind of like financial need or help, I'm going to give you some tips and some ideas of what to keep records of. So again, as I said before, a CV is going to help you a lot in terms of establishing your career as a professional artist. And again, we'll have that template loaded up on the Artist Resource Library later today. And you'll be able to edit it and input your own information in. Another thing is maybe a budget or maybe some financial records. The cool thing is that on our resource library, we had our grants manager, Julia Barbaso Landoa, create for us a project budgeting for grants toolkit. And so from here, you can look at, she gave really great details and tips on how to put together a budget. And so some of these grants do ask for project budgets or like what you need exactly money for. And so she gives a really good rundown of what to keep in mind when you're creating these budgets or these sheets or these records for applying for grants. In addition to that, if you go to our website, fresharts.org, you can go to Artist Resource Library, which is under Succeed as an Artist. In this particular context, we have health and self-care. That's where you would go to our updates regarding resources for artists to survive in times of crisis. Well, you'll actually, if you have a friend or maybe your connection's not great right now, you're more than welcome to come back to this part of our website to see this video. But in regards to other resources we have for grants and applying for grants, we have a grant proposal writing toolkit, which I put together. If you've never written one and you're in need for now, like right now in terms of applying for emergency grants or grants in general, this is a really, or at least in my opinion, it's really good because I wrote it, but is a worksheet kind of like how to put together a writing grant proposal. So again, if you've never written one, or maybe you need a new angle or a new way to think about a grant proposal, this is freely available on our resource library to learn, again, like how to put together a good proposal. So I checked those out. Again, budget. So budgets, a proposal language ready at the ready, a CV, and then again a website. Those are things you want to keep, not only just in general as an artist, but in this particular context, what these will do is they'll give you a good head start on applying for these funds, on applying for grants, just to have them ready. Because again, what a lot of these organizations or a lot of grants are going to ask for is establishing yourself as a professional artist. And again, that's defined through many things, and they'll have maybe their own prerequisites to do that. But in general, these are good things to have on hand when you're applying for these things. Again, because they do establish a regular practice for many organizations. And so with that in mind, you're going to, again, go through these lists and really check out the limitations of those, or maybe they apply exactly to you. And there are some that are more specific to visual artists. There are some that are more specific to writers or literary arts. There are some that apply specifically to actors, theater work, just different musicians. There's some that apply to musicians. And so if you're under those, again, look at those specifically. But in terms of the general emergency grants that I found or that I've seen that are particularly useful to artists in general, I just gave a rundown on those. So again, the ones that I look at with those angles are the Foundation for Contemporary Arts emergency grants. Again, if you're putting on an event or an event venue has changed, maybe you're trying to do it at a different venue, or if you're doing it online and you're incurring additional costs, that's a good one to check out and come at that angle. The Rashenberg emergency grant is if you come upon a medical emergency, one that is new and one time. Again, that one applies specifically to you. And the Haven Foundation, again, that one's more lenient, or you can be more creative in your angle in applying for that one, but again, it's by mail. So again, keep that in mind. And then Surf Plus, they're really great resource in general, but again, that mainly applies to craft artists. So again, just kind of want to give a rundown of what's available out there, what angles to take. And some of these you're going to have to be, again, creative or kind of like come at it at an angle that fulfills the requirements. So again, I would start with those, looking at those, coming up with ideas or coming up with ways in which you might need them. So again, apply to those if they apply to you. If you need help, again, we have resources on our artist resource library to get you started. So the next thing I kind of want to cover is the unemployment, disaster unemployment assistance. Houston Arts Alliance, which I'll be getting to later, their resource page. They have this really great rundown of how to apply for disaster unemployment assistance. And they'll give you kind of these tips, or they'll give you these ways to like how it would apply to you. So again, thank you to Houston Arts Alliance and Disaster. I believe their website is ready.haatx.com. This is particularly for disaster resilience for artists and nonprofits, and it's pretty much right there at the top. They have a really great resource page, and so I'd look at that when you get a chance. But in regards to unemployment, so for unemployment assistance available for artists affected by COVID-19. So for unemployment in general, going to twc.texas.gov. That is the body that specifically handles financial assistance for unemployment. So I would go to that website to learn more. But in regards to this context of what's open for artists and freelancers, so they give, a pretty good rundown of like what satisfies that. So one context where you may be able to get funding assistance for disaster and employment assistance is one, an employer temporarily ceases operations due to COVID-19, preventing employees from coming to work. So that would apply from in my experience, again, I don't know all the context, but one main context I may see this in is if you're a teaching artist, for example, and let's say you teach hourly, let's say for a nonprofit or a program in an HISD school or any school for that matter currently, as far as I understand, and you can't go on to do your teaching, and therefore you can't claim those hours, and therefore you can't get paid. So I think that would kind of satisfy this context or this prerequisite, is because HISD essentially closed all schools for instruction. And so this one I think would, if you're a teaching artist, for example, and you can't go into the school anymore because then you cannot collect those hours, that's a context that would satisfy this prerequisite, for example. There are many others. Two, an individual is quarantined with the expectation of returning to work after the quarantine is over. So that one, again, if let's say you work in an office or you work anywhere and you're forced to, or you are quarantined because you came in contact with someone with coronavirus or COVID-19, and you're asked to quarantine, and they do not pay you for those hours missed. Again, unemployment assistance could apply to that. Three, an individual leaves employment due to a risk of exposure or infection or to care for a family member. That one, I believe you would have to prove that that's the exact reason why you left. So perhaps keeping emails if you had to leave leave your employment due to a risk of exposure or infection or to care for a family member, that needs to be documented. And so in general, what I would do is keep a lot of documents in regards to how you navigate your employment in this context. So saving those emails, let's say, of where your place of employment says that you cannot come in because of coronavirus and COVID-19, keep those emails because they're going to ask for that. They're going to ask for how you came to be in this situation. And so, in addition, federal law does not require an employee to quit in order to receive benefits due to the impact of COVID-19. I believe in general it's the opposite. You can't quit and then collect unemployment. You have to essentially be laid off or let go or fired. So like federal law does not require an employee to quit in order to receive benefits due to the impact of COVID-19. So again, just simply being barred from being able to work and collect your hours and be paid, that would make for a context to apply for unemployment. And so this is not, and again, great, thank you to HAA. This is not limited to those employed by a company. Self-employed artists are also eligible. You only need to have a contract, 1099 or W-2. And so that context would be that last year, if you collected regular pay, and so that would, and you were employed by an organization or company, that's a W-2. 1099 is contract work, and then a contract. So let's say you don't have those things for last year. I believe that if you have a contract, let's say you were expecting payment to do an event in March, and that was going to make up a good chunk of your income, having that contract on hand and having the proof that it was canceled due to coronavirus, that's going to be key in you receiving those unemployment benefits. So again, having that contract ready, the amount you were going to be paid, and then the email or the whatever correspondence there was that canceled that event or canceled that contract or canceled that event, that's going to be key in receiving unemployment assistance, because essentially what they're going to do is they're going to have to have a basis for what income you were expecting. And so that's a main way of being able to establish what you were going to be paid, what income you're losing out on because of coronavirus. Another thing is you must apply for regular unemployment benefits before you receive disaster unemployment assistance, even if you know you're not eligible. So you have to go through the regular unemployment assistance process, even though their rules maybe might be a little different. Even if you know you're not going to be eligible to receive regular assistance for unemployment, you're still going to have to apply for that. So just keep that in mind. And so again, this particular resource can be found again at HAA or ready.haa.haatx.com. And again, that will be in our resource newsletter that goes out this Thursday. So again, if you're not picking up on everything, that's totally cool. You receive all this information by Thursday. And so this is the Texas Workforce Commission website. And again, they will have more details on workers' protections during or after natural disasters. So again, visiting this website, the URL's not particularly easy, but again, another resource we'll include on Thursday. Other resources will be the Small Business Administration, and we have an office here in Houston. On Thursday, we will be providing a Facebook Live panel discussion on applying for that and the process of that. We'll give more details later in the hour. So in terms of other than just financial resources, there are other resources in regards to food. So if you're having a hard time, let's say, and you were expecting a paycheck on the 15th or these coming weeks, and you just don't have money for food, here are some resources in regards to getting food. So the Houston Food Bank, they have a section of their website where you can type in your address or your zip code, and it will give you a specific nearby food pantry to you. And so that website is houstonfoodbank.org. And the way to get here is if you start from the home page, you'll go to Find Help and find a pantry near you. And so from there you can type in your address or your zip code and get your nearest food pantry. For those, each food pantry is maybe going to have different prerequisites for you to receive assistance, but a good thing to keep in hand is to have your ID, and it is to have, I believe they will have, so this applies to the Houston Food Bank. Again, I'd look at your local food pantry, but a general thing would be to have a photo ID, perhaps proof of employment, or again, proof that your work was canceled, or maybe income that you were expecting was canceled, and therefore you do not have the ability to afford food. But again, I'd key in, I'd use that resources of looking for a local pantry and seeing what the prerequisites those are for you to access the food pantry. Here's some food bank distribution sites that are happening later. So HISD and Houston Food Bank will offer daily food distribution Monday, March 16th through Friday, March 20th at 1101 Quitman Street from 3 to 6 at Northside High School. So that'll be happening until this Friday, 3 to 6 at Northside High School, a distribution site for food. Another will be, actually this is the same one. So again, those are other resources aside from financial assistance, is food. So please, again, that will go out in the resource newsletter on Thursday. And so some other things that I want to key in on are other resources, other websites or lists that will be helpful for you to check in on regularly. And so again, as I've said before, ready.haatx.com/COVID-19. Again, if you just go to ready.haatx.com, first thing that pops up. This will be, from my understanding, this will be updated regularly. So again, keep in touch with this particular website. Maybe have it ready. And again, here you'll have some more information on other financial assistance and a really great digitizing the culture experience for your audience. We have Mid-America Arts Alliance, maa.org/resources for public health. Again, this, if you go straight to their website at maa.org, you click here, and this will give you, again, another list of resources, another thing to check in regularly. Creative Capital has an arts resource page that, again, you should check out on maybe every day, at least once a day. That's what I do. They'll post any upcoming or new grant information. So again, like, I know a lot of organizations, a lot of particularly local efforts to raise funds for artists are happening every day. They're developing every day. So again, I'd go there to kind of check on as many of these lists as you can. So that's creative-capital.org. And again, if you just Google Creative Capital, it's the first thing that pops up. Another one is commonfield.org. They have a public or an editable resources document for artists. And that is updated again, who knows when, but like another great resource to keep checking in on. You may see a lot of repeated information. That's why I covered the ones that I saw regularly being posted on these websites or these resource boards. Those are the ones that I commonly have been posted. So that's why I went over those. But again, you never know what pops up every day. So again, it's really good to check in on all these sites to see something that might apply to you. So commonfield.org. Again, that one, Google Common Field, and this one, again, on the front page. Glass Tire has another great site, has a good page, rather, on what's popping up in Texas in particular, but also nationally, resources for artists that are coming up. So again, that's on their front page. If you go to glasstire.com, this one will be more towards the middle. Again, Surf Plus, another great organization and website to just check in on regularly. ArtsReady, artsready.org. This one is an online emergency preparedness service, particularly for artists. So again, subscribing to them, keeping in touch with them, I would do that. And so again, those resources are ready.haatx.com, maa.a.org, Creative Capital, Common Field, Glass Tire, and Surf Plus, and Arts Ready. Those are ones that I'd subscribe to or check in on every day to see if anything pops up. And then finally, just to give you other ideas of what's happening in regards to collecting data from artists. A lot of nonprofits right now, what they're doing is they're collecting data of arts organizations or artists, individual artists, to kind of give maybe regular updates or clue into what is happening and what people need. And so Americans for the Arts, they have a survey that's going around, so americansforthearts.org. This one particularly applies to arts organizations. So if you work with one or you work for one, this is one where they're collecting data specifically to that, to organizations. Fresh Arts will be passing around one through our email channels and digital channels to collect information, particularly on individual artists. Mid-America Arts Alliance will also be doing that. So I know that's a lot of surveys. I know that's a lot of things to fill out. But again, these are important to kind of give us an idea of knowing how much impact, to give a quantifiable impact that the coronavirus is having on artists, on the arts. And that is information we use, that is information we need to have ready when we go to, let's say, different organizations, or we go to state or local governmental institutions and provide resources to artists that, again, we would have access to that information, and we need that information to be able to do that effectively. So I know it's a lot of surveys going around, and so if you have the time, please fill out as many as possible. The more information that's out there, the more data we can work from, the better, and the better we can advocate for artists. Just other quick things. Glass Tire, they are seeking submissions for short videos of Texas art exhibitions. So they're asking commercial galleries, nonprofits, and artist-run spaces across the state to send a video walkthrough of current exhibitions. That might be because they're collecting digital exhibitions of the arts that are happening, but people can't go to. So I think that's a really cool idea to check out and to submit to if it applies to you. There's a social distancing festival. Again, another cool tactic of like still engaging the arts, of still having audiences and adapting to what is happening right now. Again, Fresh Arts will be having an informational panel and discussion regarding how to do that effectively next week. So stay tuned for that one. And again, just some general resources that we provide. Go to freshartsregistry.org to create a profile. This is another way that we can collect information to understand how many artists are working in Houston. This is also a good way to be found. So if you want commissions or if you need commissions, this is one way to be found and made available. This is what we refer to. This is how we get artists contacted, at least through us. Go to fresharts.org. If you have a digital, if you have an event and it is being turned digital, feel free to let us know. We'll let it out. We'll let people know in our Art on Tap newsletter. There's one going out today, later today, around 1 or 2, that will highlight particularly digital exhibitions or digital events that are still going on, or things you can access normally, but specifically regarding the arts. So that'll always be there. And again, I would go to fresharts.org and maybe let us know if that's happening, if that's still happening. And again, visit our Artist Resource Library. There you can find different resources in general, but in regards to coronavirus, go to Health and Self-Care, and it is the first tab. And that's where we will regularly update whatever resources or whatever things we find. And again, subscribe to our Artist Resource newsletter. To do that, go to Succeed as an Artist, go to Artist Opportunity, or rather Resource Newsletter under Artist Opportunity Board. And from there, subscribe. And on Thursday, you'll be getting a lot of what I talked about today in regards to emergency grants or opportunities, and what angles and what advice I could give you, what tips in applying for these grants. And again, please feel free to let us know if there's any topics that we should touch upon, things you would like to see addressed. I'm sure many of you in the comments, Facebook Live comments, I have not been able to see them, but I know we've received many. And so again, keep at it. Please let us know how other ways we can assist you, what information you would like to see. If the tips or angles are helpful, let us know if you would like more of those. again, whatever the artist community needs, Fresh Arts, we'll do it. We'll do our best to address those needs. And so again, we love you. We love artists. We hope. We know these next coming weeks will be particularly difficult. And so again, it's imperative to us to know what you need so that we can do our best to provide those. So again, as regards to this Thursday, please tune back in at noon. We'll be having a panel discussion with the Small Business Administration. And Angela, did you want to give more details on that?
Hi, I'm Angela Carranza, the programs manager for Fresh Arts. I've been behind the scenes, so I'm the one posting all of the links. So yeah, on Thursday at noon, Facebook Live will be partnering with the Small Business. We'll be partnering with the Houston office of the Small Business Administration for an online conversation to talk about SBA loans. We'll talk with artist Marlana Doyle of the Institute of Contemporary Dance to talk about her experience with the application process. And again, SBA loans is something that artists are eligible for, so we'll talk directly with the SBA about what the artist eligibility looks like in that process. And again, we are sending out lots of information. There's feedback forms that you can fill out. You can also email us directly. You can contact any of us through our website and our social media channels. We are here for you.
Thank you, Angela. So again, please tune in Thursday. I'll see you Thursday. And again, we'll be here. So thank you.
I wasn't prepared.